Creo que están grabando. Ok, están grabando. Perfecto. Entonces, bueno, primero que nada, buenas tardes a todas y todos y muy bienvenidos al primer día de nuestro Seminario Internacional de Incorporación de Perspectiva de Género en STEM. Yo soy Darinka Radovic y soy la subdirectora de la Dirección de Diversidad y Género de la Facultad de Ciencias Físicas y Matemáticas de la Universidad de Chile, y tengo la labor de presentar el inicio de este seminario y la primera actividad. Este seminario se enmarca dentro del sello Género Igualdad, un proceso de transversalización de la igualdad de género en las distintas áreas del quehacer sustantivo de la universidad y de la facultad. En particular, aporta al objetivo de promover la incorporación de perspectiva de género en investigación, desarrollo, innovación y emprendimiento. Ahora, ¿qué significa incorporar perspectiva de género en investigación, desarrollo, innovación y emprendimiento? La primera y una importante respuesta a esta pregunta se refiere a la búsqueda de mayor igualdad de género en la conformación de equipos que investigan y generan desarrollo en las áreas STEM. Diversa investigación ha mostrado que equipos más diversos generan mejores soluciones, incluyendo mejores indicadores de productividad, más creatividad e incluso soluciones más sustentables. Y en Chile los desafíos que tenemos en esta área son bastante importantes. Por ejemplo, en áreas STEM, el porcentaje de matrícula y de graduadas en estas áreas se acerca al 20%, siendo uno de los porcentajes más bajos en los países de la OECD. Esto implica que contamos con menor participación de mujeres en la academia y en la investigación en áreas STEM, dificultando que el conocimiento y las soluciones que desarrollamos atiendan a las necesidades de todos y todas. Pero aun cuando tener más mujeres en los equipos ayuda a alcanzar mejores productos científicos y soluciones tecnológicas, es necesario intervenir todo el proceso de investigación de manera de que las prioridades, las preguntas, las metodologías den cuenta del impacto diferenciado que el sexo y el género pueden tener en estos productos. Considerando este desafío, la Facultad de Ciencias Físicas y Matemáticas se ha planteado distintas metas que están directamente dirigidas a apoyar iniciativas, formar a la comunidad y desarrollar herramientas que nos permitan ir integrando perspectiva de género en todo el proceso de desarrollo de I+D+, I+E. En el tema de apoyo a iniciativas, durante este año la Dirección de Diversidad y Género lanzó un primer fondo para el apoyo a investigadores e investigadoras de la facultad. Este fondo tiene por objetivo permitir que en distintas áreas STEM estos investigadores e investigadoras exploren formas en las que el sexo y el género puede estar afectando sus procesos de investigación y desarrollo. Contamos con 4 proyectos finalizando su implementación. Primero, financiamos el apoyo y la implementación de una nueva tecnología para la remoción de arsénico en aguas contaminadas. La investigadora Vania Rojas está explorando potenciales impactos diferenciados en los usuarios finales de esta tecnología en las zonas de Chunchurí y Socaire, en la región de Antofagasta. También financiamos un estudio de actitudes hacia la alimentación en base de hongos. La investigadora Francisca Marchán está trabajando en diferencias en las disposiciones hacia este tipo de alimentos para evaluar diferencias de género y potenciales implicancias para su desarrollo y su posterior comercialización. Además, financiamos un estudio de evaluación de metodologías para disminuir sesgos en modelos de lenguaje natural. Un equipo liderado por Felipe Bravo ha estado probando metodologías que permitan que los vectores de palabras, que son la base para los modelos de procesamiento del lenguaje natural, muestren menores sesgos de género. Y por último, Xiomara Gertsen lidera un proyecto que pretende evaluar con perspectiva de género la implementación de un proyecto de algas, específicamente en cómo las variables de sexo y género intervienen en las distintas partes interesadas, comunidades, industrias y las mujeres recolectoras de algas. Los proyectos que han recibido apoyo muestran distintas aproximaciones a la problemática y están siendo implementadas en distintas áreas STEM, permitiendo explorar entonces distintas metodologías para la incorporación de perspectiva de género en I+D. En el tema de formar a la comunidad, la Facultad de Ciencias Físicas y Matemáticas ha impulsado durante el 2024 la implementación del primer diplomado en incorporación de perspectiva de género en STEM. Este diplomado cubre conceptos generales relacionados con sexo y género, principales brechas en STEM, desafíos en la educación en estas áreas y aplicaciones en distintas áreas. El programa cubre aplicaciones en ciencia climática, desastres naturales, tecnología, datos, entre otras, y explora cómo el sexo y el género afectan importantes ecosistemas relacionados con la investigación, el desarrollo y la innovación, como las empresas, el emprendimiento y las políticas públicas. Durante estas semanas estamos finalizando la primera implementación del diplomado y comenzaremos la difusión para su implementación el 2025 y quedan todas y todos invitados a consultar sobre este súper interesante programa. Y por último, en el tema de desarrollo de herramientas, estamos estos días lanzando un documento que desarrollamos en la Dirección de Diversidad y Género que resume y sistematiza distintas herramientas disponibles. En este documento se comparten preguntas relevantes y metodologías útiles para la incorporación de perspectiva de género en las distintas etapas del desarrollo de I+D+i+E, recogiendo además ejemplos desarrollados en distintas áreas STEM. El documento ya está disponible en nuestra página web y pueden acceder a través del QR que está ahí o dirigirse a la página de la DDG que la encuentran por Google. Y bueno, es en el desarrollo de esta herramienta cuando nos encontramos con el trabajo del Gender Innovation y la contribución de la profesora Londa Schivinger, nuestra invitada a estas temáticas. Londa Schivinger es profesora de Historia de la Ciencia de la Universidad de Stanford y directora fundadora de Gender Innovation en Ciencia, Salud y Medicina, Ingeniería y Medio Ambiente. Es una experta internacional líder en temas de género en ciencia y tecnología y ha dirigido conferencias en las Naciones Unidas, el Parlamento Europeo y la Asamblea Nacional de Corea sobre dicho tema. Schivinger recibió su doctorado de la Universidad de Harvard y es miembro electa de la Academia Estadounidense de Artes y Ciencias. Ha recibido numerosos premios y reconocimientos, incluyendo el prestigioso Premio de Investigación Alexander von Humboldt y la beca Guggenheim. Tiene doctorados honorarios en distintas universidades en España, Suecia y Bélgica. Cuenta con numerosas prestigiosas publicaciones en revistas como Nature y Science, en temas relevantes como sesgos en inteligencia artificial, la importancia del análisis de sexo y género en ciencia e ingeniería, y muchas publicaciones en temas de salud. Nos acompaña hoy para dictar una clase magistral en estos temas, lo que nos tiene muy contentas. Vamos a dejar con ustedes entonces a la profesora Schivinger para que haga su clase y luego contaremos con un momento para hacer preguntas. Dear Londa, thank you very much for agreeing to join us today. You can now start with your class. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Okay, and I shall share mine. And here we go. So good morning. Well, it's afternoon for you. It's good morning for me here in California at Stanford University. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, if only virtually, and I'm delighted to join you in this master's class. I'm very sorry I don't speak Spanish. It's a failing, but I didn't learn. So anyway, I'll speak for about 50 minutes and then I'll look forward to a lively Q&A. And please feel free to ask anything. I'm happy to answer questions. So Gendered Innovations was founded in 2009 and produced through a large international collaboration involving the European Commission, the U.S. National Science Foundation, and Stanford University. New policies have been implemented across Europe, North America, Asia, and parts of Africa. And I would be very happy to learn more about your policies here in Chile today. What policies do your national granting agencies have that promote the integration of sex, gender, and what I'm going to call intersectionality into the content of the research, into the research design, because that's what we're talking about. Gendered Innovations Institutes were opened in South Korea in 2015 and Japan in 2022. These are marvelous developments. And then Gendered Innovation also works in Silicon Valley with industry leaders such as Apple and Google and the like. Our website has been enjoyed by 2.5 million users across 185 countries. So innovation is about integrating sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into the design of research. The operative question is, how can we harness the creative power of this type of analysis for discovery and innovation? Does this approach add valuable dimensions to research? Does it take research in new directions? So I want to give you a bit of background so we don't have some common misunderstandings. Governments and universities have taken 3 strategic approaches to gender equity over the past several decades. The first I call fix the numbers. That includes increasing the numbers of women and underrepresented groups in science and engineering. This is about participation. It's about getting more women and underrepresented minorities into science and engineering. The second is I call fix the institutions, which promotes gender equity in careers through structural change in research organizations. It's about making sure university cultures are welcome to the newcomers. It's about things like work-life balance. And the third one is fix the knowledge or gendered innovations. This stimulates excellence in science and technology by integrating sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into research. And my talk today will focus on the third strategic approach, fixing the knowledge. It's the newest and most important for the future of science, and that's what gendered innovations is all about. So, but to complicate things, we distinguish these 3 fixes analytically, but in reality, they work together. And although many people try to fix the numbers first, we won't fix the numbers unless we fix the knowledge. So let me give you one quick example of the link between who does science and what science is created. It's important to recognize that in the US, women file only 13% of patents. It's a real failure. It's been like that forever. In this study by Rem Koenig at Harvard's Business School, Rem shows that if all biomedical patents filed between 1976 and 2010 had been produced equally by men and women, there would be, by his calculations, some 65,000 more female-focused biomedical inventions, leading to biotechnologies that would benefit women. Okay, so why might all of this be relevant to your research? Perhaps you collaborate with colleagues in Europe. Beginning in 2020, the European Commission's Horizon Europe strengthened its gender dimension in research. Applicants are now required, not just asked to, but required to integrate sex, gender, and/or intersectional analysis into the design of research, or to justify that it's not relevant. Maybe you're doing theoretical physics. Maybe it's not relevant, but you have to just justify that. Or maybe you collaborate with scholars in the US. In 2016, the US National Institutes of Health implemented its requirement that sex as a biological variable be included in all publicly funded research. The idea is, and this is important, the idea is that if taxpayer money is used, the research produced should benefit all people across the whole of society. Now, we're wondering when the NIH will have gender as a sociocultural variable. 2 years ago, there was a huge virtual meeting on that. Over 1,000 people came. And as soon as people started talking about gender, then the issues of racism came up and socioeconomic status and all kinds of other issues. So we hope that NIH will launch a social aspect to their policy very soon. So policy is great, but often scientists and engineers have not been taught about gender analysis in their professional training and don't know how to do it at the highest level of excellence. To support their policy, the European Commission held a 2-year expert group, which I directed, and this group consisted of 25 experts from numerous fields of science, from biomedicine to marine science to machine learning and environmental sciences. Our results are published here. The book is easy to find and download. It's free, or you can see the results on the Gendered Innovations website. Okay, now that I've set the stage, let's dive into why all of this is important. In what follows today, I will discuss examples from ML and AI. I will discuss social assistive robots, and I'll end with an example related to climate change. So each is an example of how taking sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into account can help us create science and technology that works for everyone. So doing research wrong costs lives and money. For example, 10 drugs were recently withdrawn from the US market because of life-threatening health effect, and 8 of those, 80%, 8 of those posed greater threats for women. Not only did these drugs cost billions of dollars to develop, but when they fail, they cause death and human suffering. We can't afford to get the research wrong. It was really this US government study in 2001 that set change in motion in this area. But doing research right can save lives and money. A new study from the US shows the economic value of doing research right. Take heart disease, the #1 killer of women as well as men. A new study shows that improving women's heart health could add a staggering 1.6 billion quality life years for women and boost the US economy by $28 billion annually by 2040. Much the same is true for other diseases such as autoimmune and Alzheimer's disease. So doing research right is crucial, and it's crucial to get the research right from the very beginning. And this is the goal of Gendered Innovations. This project develops state-of-the-art methods of sex, gender, and intersectional analysis and provides case studies to illustrate how sex, gender, and intersectionality leads to discovery and innovation. And in this talk, I'll give you some of these case studies. Now, to start with, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What do we mean when we say the term sex, and what do we mean by the term gender? I'll explain intersectionality in a minute. So sex and gender are distinct terms and must be used correctly. Sex is about biological characteristics such as height, weight, genes, hormones, that sort of thing. Gender, by contrast, is about cultural attitudes and behaviors. Now, for the experts among you, we have very exciting special sections on sex and gender from Nature magazine and from Cell this past spring. Nature, for example, emphasizes that we need, quote, more nuanced approaches to exploring sex and gender in research. So the focus on sex and gender in Cell is in the March issue. It's all there. There's a Q&A with me, which was a real pleasure to do. And the Nature articles are spread out, but the editorial from May 1st guides you to all of them. I recommend these special sections to you. They're online, easy to find and read. Now, a lot of us think of sex and gender in binary terms, male, female, man, woman, but gender is moving quickly beyond just men and women. A 2023 Statistica survey found that 3% of respondents from 30 countries identified as non-binary, transgender, gender fluid, or non-conforming. So I see here for Latin America, we have Chile and Brazil at 3%, Colombia at 2%, Argentina and Peru at 1%. I was interested to see that. I think the US is at 2%. Importantly, some 15 countries globally allow a third sex category on legal documents such as passports. These are usually big fights in the legislature, right? But the US, for example, Germany, India, all have a third category on legal documents. So this means that legally people can travel if it's on the passport as male, female, or unspecified, usually indicated as an X, which I don't find so nice, but you know, at least there is some choice. So let me move on now to these examples. As I said, doing research wrong costs lives and money. Research can fail and fail more often for women. So let's zoom through some examples and see how gender analysis can help solve these problems. And I'm going to start in the world of machine learning and AI. And here now, I want to begin introducing you to the higher level of analysis, intersectionality. So that's what this section of my talk is about. So let's first take, there's a little quiz coming up, so listen carefully. So let's take search engines. In Google search, let's say you're searching for jobs. In the search results that appear, men are 5 times more likely than women to be offered ads for high-paying executive jobs. So why is this? It has to do with the data and the search algorithm. Men in the US on average are paid 20% more than women. I can't believe that's still true, but it's true. So this is an average of all men and all women, not broken down by education or you know, background, anything like that. So the algorithm has been designed to get the ad to the right person. In this case, an ad for a high-paying job goes to a man, and this perpetuates the cycle of social inequalities. Now, once engineers, you see this is from 2015, once engineers became aware of the problem, it can be fixed, and I'm sure Google has fixed it. Now, if we go on to computer vision, as you know, computer vision, these are programs that interpret images in words. So if you have an image of a cat, it will write cat, this sort of thing. Now, in this image that I have here, you see the photograph of a traditional US bride dressed in white, and this photograph is correctly labeled bride, dress, woman. But this photograph of a beautiful North Indian bride is mislabeled as performance art, red, costume. So why is that? Again, it's the problem of the data. Because 45% of images in ImageNet come from the US, even though we represent only 4% of the world's population, this is why it skews to our social norms. So by contrast, China and India together contribute just 3% of the ImageNet data, even though these countries represent 36% of the world's population. So we need data sets with appropriate geodiversity. Now, in health technology, pulse oximeters don't work for people with darker skin. So as you know, pulse oximeters measure the level of oxygen in your blood, and this became very important during the pandemic. So why don't pulse oximeters work for people with darker skin? Because the near-infrared technology confuses the melanin in the skin, or the color in the skin, with the oxygen in the blood. An analysis of over 47,000 readings found that oximeters misread blood gases 12% of the time in patients with darker skin, compared to 4% of the time in patients with lighter skin. This puts these patients at risk for serious heart conditions. And a lot of technology works this way, such as the Apple Watch. And it's not just darker skin, it can be tattoos, anything that confuses these near infrared lights with whatever it is they're looking for, like blood oxygen. Or let's come now to sex, so height, weight, form. Let's take the CPR dummy. CPR dummies are used to train emergency medical workers to resuscitate people when they have heart attacks or other emergencies. So what problem do you see here? All the CPR dummies model the male body. They all have flat chests. Yes, they come in diverse skin tones, which I find interesting, but not in different sexes. This means that the emergency workers are not trained to help women. Women who need CPR in public are 27% less likely than men to receive CPR. Now, there are many reasons for this. bystanders, if you're just there and you could help, are reluctant to touch the chest of a woman they don't know. People generally don't want to touch a woman's chest for ethical and moral reasons. Plus, people fear that they will be hurting the breast because they've not been trained to do CPR on dummies with breasts, so they don't know how to do it. There have been now some corrections. A group in New York has made fabric breasts that can go over the CPR dummy, but it's not a fundamental basic change. I'm sure companies will be on it soon. As soon as you point these things out, companies usually get on it. So each of these examples is important, but now here's the quiz question. What did you notice about them? So think about it for a moment. Each example focuses on only one social dimension in isolation, either gender, which was highlighted through the example of Google search, or geographic location, highlighted in the computer vision, skin tone, with the example of pulse oximeters, or sex, the CPR dummy. And here we want to focus on a higher level problem, intersectionality. So what is intersectionality? What is an intersectional approach? Intersectionality describes overlapping or intersecting forms of discrimination related to gender, sex, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, sexuality. It could be any of the important social factors, and I've just selected out a few for the chart here, could be many. The term was coined in 1989 by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw to describe how multiple forms of discrimination intersect specifically in Black women's lives. In 1989, her concern was that the white feminist movement was excluding women of color. And today the term is used broadly to take into account many forms of overlapping discrimination. So let's show you how that works in facial recognition. So this research on facial recognition was done by Joy Buolamwini, and it's called Gender Shades. While a graduate student at MIT, Joy Buolamwini learned that the facial recognition system she was working on could not see Black women's faces. Her system could not see her. Even though she was creating it, it couldn't see her until she put on a white mask. So her gender shade study, so she switched then her PhD thesis to be this gender shade study, which became very, very important. Her gender shade study studies intersectionality, specifically how sex and race intersect, and shows that facial recognition cannot see Black women's faces. The gender analysis shows that the system performed better on men's faces than on women's faces. It had been trained on men's faces. The race analysis shows the system performed better on lighter skin than darker skin. And the intersectional analysis is what we're interested in. The system performed worse for Black women with an error rate of 35% for darker skinned women. That's really unacceptable. It got a little bit better, 12% error rate for darker skinned men. Then again, slightly better, 7% error rate for lighter skinned women, and then almost no error rate, 1% for lighter skinned men. So, but there's more. We could do a sexuality analysis. The system cannot recognize transgender faces often, especially during the transition periods. So here we have an intersectional innovation. To solve the problem, Buolamwini and her co-author Gebru created a more inclusive data set that included the faces of men and women of lighter and darker skin drawn from members of parliament from 6 countries, 3 in Africa, 3 in Europe. She used parliamentary members because they're public faces, so you can use them. But what problem do you see here? Is the data set inclusive globally? So my students saw immediately that there are no Asians or indigenous peoples from the Americas or Australia imaged. And we don't know if there are any binary people imaged, for example. So we still need more innovations to make sure that the technology will work for everyone. But let me add, getting the data right and making the technology see everyone is one aspect of the problem with facial recognition. Larger issues are security, for instance. Transgender people, for example, may not want to be tracked by facial recognition systems at all. And as you know, many countries have banned or limited the use of facial recognition in police departments and the like. Now, we here at Gendered Innovations have released a tool for intersectionality, our intersectional design cards. We were pleased that they won a design prize in the UK. They're for designers, so they're for people making products or designing services. And we have our 12 factors here. You can see age, disability, educational background. These are the ones we chose as important as you start your design to think about. There are many more. And we also put blank cards in the deck of cards so that you can add any intersecting factors important to your product or service. So these are available on our website. We also have it all done virtually, so you can see it there. Now here's Apple's intersectional list of factors, as they say, to empower and delight everyone. And I especially liked this one-handedness. Are you left-handed? Are you right-handed? Are you ambidextrous? It's important and often overlooked. My neighbor, so I'm a faculty member at Stanford, and we live on the campus in houses. It's so that we don't have to commute far. So all of my neighbors are professors, which is a lot of fun. And my neighbor is a world-class hand surgeon. She focuses on the thumb, and she's left-handed. But because surgical instruments are created for right-handed people, she's had to learn all of her surgeries with her non-dominant hand. Imagine how amazing she could be if the technology had fit her needs rather than her needing to fit the technology's needs. Now, I want to make several points about these intersectional factors. Both of these sets of factors, both ours and Apple's, were developed in a US context. So you in Chile may want to exclude some of these factors and include some others. But because we all design or create science and technology for global cultures, you may still need to think about some, even if they aren't prominent in Chile. Now, a second point to make is that each researcher needs to choose the factors most relevant to their project. You can't look at all of the factors, so you need to choose what to focus on. But you don't want that to be an unconscious default. You need to make careful decisions as you do your lit review, as you decide what data you will be collecting, and so on and so forth, all at the beginning of the project. Now, before we go on to social robots, I wanted to take a look at our term gender and our method analyzing gender and our method sex and gender interact. And so I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen. I'm sorry for this kind of going back and forth, but I think it's important to do this. So this is our website. You can see, yes? Yes, okay, good. So the website should be a great resource for you. We have all of our terms loaded up here. So what does the term gender really mean? I wonder if I sat you down and had you write it, a paragraph on what gender really means, what would you say? So gender, again, is about sociocultural attitudes and behaviors and identity. And there are three related dimensions of gender. A lot of people just think of gender as gender identity. Okay, how do I identify myself? I find that all very precious. But nonetheless, gender identity is one of them, but probably the most important one is gender norms. Now, gender norms, I didn't want it quite that big. Let's go back. Gender norms are those social norms that press on an individual and limit your behavior or teach you how to behave as a man, woman, non-binary person. So the norms are in the workplace, in your university, in your family culture, in your institutional policies at the state and federal level, and also at the global level. So these are important. They're the social pressures pushing in on you. And then gender identity, you are the individual who can push out against and change those social norms. But another one that's very important that people don't really think about are gender relations. So gender relations are the power relations between people. As soon as you enter a room, you start probably an unconscious negotiation with the other person in the room. We as humans need to know, are we safe? Number one. So you look at who the other person is, but then you unconsciously think, and using gender also as cues, think about the power relations between people. So gender refers to at least three things: gender norms, gender identities, and gender relations. And we don't want to simplify it just down to identities. Then if you look at our methods, we have all of our methods loaded up here. These were revised in 2020 in that big EU expert group. And if we look at gender analysis, again, I hope this will be helpful to you. When we do gender analysis or sex analysis or any of these things, it's not just having equal numbers of men and women in your project as participants or subjects or researchers. It is about identifying, it goes through the entire process, all phases of the research. So it's about identifying the problem. And then we have here points that you would want to consider as you're setting up your problem. And we also have some of the latest literature here, so you can go and look at it. So it's about identifying the problem. It's about designing the research. It's about collecting data, analyzing the data, and then dissemination. So we have our tips. You can use it as a PowerPoint. You can please use this material. It's for you there. And the other general method I wanted to point out is that sex and gender interact, and they interact with other characteristics as well, socioeconomic status, age, all of these things. Oh, there's a really interesting one, sex and sex interact, but I don't have time to talk about that. But whenever we have, this is about animal research, this is about patient health. I know you don't do medicine, so I'm not presenting these. But sex and gender also interact. Your physical body determines how people respond to you, and how people respond to you determines a lot about your life. So anyway, please use these resources. Now I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint, which should still be here, and indeed it is. I'm always pleased. Okay, you can see that now. All right. Now I'm going to go on to social robots. And surely the robots are coming. They better hurry up. I really want a robot that can clean up my kitchen. Where are the roboticists? So there are a lot of questions about what social characteristics robots should embody, if any. So these are social robots. They're robots coming into your home. They're the robots going into hospitals to help. They're robots coming into homes to help elderly people, to help young people, take care of children, clean up the house, all of these sorts of things. So, for example, how should robots be gendered? If the robot is a nursing robot, should it be gendered female to match user experience and expectations? We must remember that 90% of nurses in the US and across the globe are women. If robots meet user expectations, will patients be more compliant? Will the patient be more likely to take the medicine? or do the exercises the robot is recommending. Now, it's important to remember that robots are designed in a world alive with gender norms, gender identity, and gender relations. So, as I said before, gender norms are these spoken and unspoken cultural attitudes that influence our behavior. And humans, whether as designers designing the robots or users using the robots, tend to gender machines because in human culture, gender remains a primary social category. So many specialists in human-robot interaction argue that the human tendency to project gender onto artificial intelligences may help users engage more effectively with the robots. But there is a danger here. As soon as users gender a machine, stereotypes follow. The danger is that gendering robots may reinforce gender inequalities by embodying current stereotypes. Designing hardware, that is to say, robots toward current stereotypes, may amplify these stereotypes into the future. We've seen this with Siri and Alexa and all of these female-voiced assistants, virtual assistants. So the challenge to designers is to understand how gender becomes embodied in robots, and number two, to design robots that promote social equality. So let's take number one. What genders a robot? So how would you read this little robot, Pepper? This is Pepper. It was produced by a Japanese, it was first designed in France, but then purchased by a Japanese company, SoftBank. I think it's now recently been taken off the market, but it's still well known. So let's look at the things that gender a robot. First is the name. Okay, the name Pepper. What does the name Pepper say to you? What does it scream to you? If you met a Pepper, what would you think about this person or robot? So I used to think Pepper was not gendered at all, but my students tell me, this is why we have students, right? But my students tell me that Pepper is highly gendered. In the Marvel universe, Pepper Potts was the helpful female assistant to Iron Man. So this name does carry gender, it's hardly gender neutral, and that's a global franchise, right? Iron Man. So people would tend to gender Pepper as this female assistant. Again, all of our assistive technologies become female, which reinforces the stereotypes that females are always assistants. Okay, now we look at the anatomy, which I find very confusing. In the absence of hair, this robot looks a little boyish, but this cinched waist here and skirt-like legs seem very feminine. Now in Japan, of course, samurai wear long skirts, so maybe in that cultural context, it is not feminine, but to us, to me anyway, it looks quite feminine. Then the voice. Voices are full of cultural information. The pitch of a voice indicates whether it's male, female, or child. A choice of voice for a robot may be domain specific. Users in one experiment were more accepting of a male voiced robot in a security role, such as in airports and shopping malls, but they wanted a female voiced robot in a healthcare role. So you can immediately see how this reinforces stereotypes. Now, Pepper's voice is childish, as are many assistive technologies. A childish voice is non-threatening. But there's an innovation I would like to show you here, and that is the first genderless AI voice. So let me go to I would like to share my screen. There it is. And I will play for you the world's first gender neutral voice, and that's Q.
Hi, I'm Q, the world's first genderless voice assistant. Think of me like Siri or Alexa, but neither male nor female. I'm created for a future where we are no longer defined by gender, but rather how we define ourselves. My voice was recorded by people who neither identify as male nor female, and then altered to sound gender neutral putting my voice between 145 and 175 Hz, a range defined by audio researchers. But for me to become a third option for voice assistants, I need your help. Share my voice with Apple, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. And together we can ensure that technology recognizes us all. Thanks for listening. Q.
So you don't have to share it with Apple because they made their own voice called voice.
Who is the best voice
Oh, no.
assistant? So we've
Oh,
got Apple
no.
Siri versus Google Assistant
no.
versus Amazon's Alexa.
Oh, no. Okay, I think I killed it. I'm sorry. One can't control these things. Okay, I'd like to go back to my, looks like that's my PowerPoint. Okay, here we go. So that's Q. People are trying to make these things less gendered. It was created in Denmark in 2019. And I know when I listened to it for the first time, all I tried to decide is whether it was a male or a female. But nonetheless, this is catching on. As I just said, Apple made a voice number 5 for its iPhone, and it is also a genderless voice. Okay, now going on with the robot, what about color in the robot? Social critics point out that most robots are white plastic to be sure, and many have blue eyes, which can be problematic from an ethnic point of view. And this is important because the robots will be used internationally. So it would be easy to choose an eye color outside the human palette, orange or purple, for example. Now, interestingly, we found one robot that can be customized for skin tone and gender. So Carver is a darker skin tone robot designed for learners with autism spectrum disorder. And Milo is the lighter skin toned robot with the same function. And I used to criticize RoboKint, the company behind the robots, because they only had boy-like robots. But the company has just released Veda, the lighter skinned girl, and Gemma, the darker skin toned girl. This is important because even though autism affects 4 times as many boys as girls, we need a teaching robot for the millions of girls suffering from the disorder. Now, I didn't find a non-binary or a transgender robot, but that may be coming. So let me say that it might be best to keep robots in robot space without anthropomorphizing them. And here's, I think, a nice example from Fraunhofer in Berlin. It's called the Carolbot. That is a gender-neutral name, and users can personalize the name or choose a male or female voice. There are 40 different languages that they can choose also. And here's a new robot from Stanford, Princeton, and Google. It's called the TidyBot. It's one of the many emerging domestic robots. It can't do the dishes or clean up the kitchen. It has been trained to tidy your room, to sort the laundry, and do other simple tasks. You can see it's picking up toys and clothes here. I think it was made by young roboticists who have young children at home, and I think that's what they were prioritizing. So I was chatting with one of the roboticists on the team who I've been working with before, and she mentioned that they hadn't named the robot yet. And I told her that TidyBot was the perfect name. I don't know what, I mean, it's perfect, right? It's not gendered, it's just tidying up. So again, the challenge to roboticists is to understand how gender is embodied in robots, and importantly, design robots to promote social equality. Designers need to create a virtuous circle. The goal is to produce robots that promote social equality. So we know that culture is alive with gender norms. Engineers have the opportunity to challenge those norms in their designs. These algorithms or robots can then promote gender equality in the product, the robot or the virtual assistant. The users have the opportunity then to rethink gender, and this might change our culture. Now, before I go on to marine science, which is my last example, I'd like to take a moment to go back to the website and look at the term sex and analyzing sex, so you get a better idea of how to use the website and also to understand these things. So sex, the term sex. Again, if I had you just sit down and write a paragraph, what is sex? Well, okay. So in humans and non-human mammals, we can describe sex. And I just love this image. It's from Scientific American, and it describes the whole biological chain of events in humans and non-human mammals that determine whether an organ, whether a person becomes male, female, or intersex. So you can, it becomes bigger if you click on it, and you can have a look at that. Now, in non-mammals, we need to describe sex as well. And then for engineering and product design, we need to describe sex. This is height and weight, and the kind, and for like crash test dummies and for the CPR dummies, you have to think about sex characteristics. Okay, and then we have to be careful not to overemphasize sex or gender, because there's a lot of overlap between groups and variation within groups. Now, if we go to the method analyzing sex, it's the same kind of thing we had with gender. It's throughout the entire process. And that's one of the main points I want to make today, that you have to do it through the entire process. It's not a simple thing. It has to inform everything from the very beginning. Now, I want to finish up with an example from marine science, which I find very interesting. Okay, share. Okay, good. All right. And boom. Okay. So we're climate change and marine science. I showed here the work of Elena Giese. In 2022, I had the privilege of hosting Elena to work with me and colleagues at Stanford's Marine Station. And we've now published this great review of sex analysis in marine organisms. And I'm happy to say that Elena is now a senior scientist at the Institute for Marine Science in Venice, and I find her work very exciting. So when we discuss sex in marine organisms, it's complicated. As I said, when we talk about humans, there's male, female, and there's intersex. In marine organisms, there's males and there's females. There's simultaneous hermaphrodites, sequential hermaphrodites, potandric hermaphrodites. They start life as males and become females. There's protogynous hermaphrodites that start life as females and become male. And so it's quite complicated. I find marine organisms evolutionarily imaginative when it comes to sex. And I wonder why we humans are so very, very boring. I'd love to start life as a female and turn to male, or vice versa. Now, I want to note, for those of you who publish in English, it's very important that we use the term hermaphrodite for plants and animals and intersex for humans. So global warming is hurting marine organisms, and this is a concern for us all today. Importantly, whether we're talking about fish or mollusks or crustaceans or other marine organisms, they respond to global warming, and their response can vary by sex. Males may react differently than females, for example. And in this very important article here, Rob Ellis says, does sex really matter? He reviewed the state of sex analysis in marine science in 2017 and learned that only 4% of the studies analyzed sex. This is a missed opportunity. So why is this important? For species reliant on temperature for sex determination, such as turtles, rapid global warming poses a risk to sex ratios and the stability of the population. So as you probably know, which you learned in grade school, the sex of a turtle is determined by the temperature. If the climate's warmer, you get a female. If the climate's cooler, you get a male. An important study found that the turtle sex ratio responded dramatically to global warming. In Australia, Turtles born in the warmer part of the Great Barrier Reef, for instance, became 99% female, while turtles born in the cooler part of the Great Barrier Reef remained a more natural 68% female. Such changes in sex balance can lead to population collapse. If a population is 99% female, it's very hard for it to reproduce. So analyzing sex-based responses to climate change enables better modeling of demographic change among marine organisms and downstream impacts on humans. If sex is not taken into account, marine protected areas, for example, might unintentionally protect one sex, but not the other. So in response to the turtle emergency, the Queensland's government in Australia implemented nest cooling techniques in efforts to increase the number of male hatchlings. I could give similar examples for walruses and other organisms. So I want to close by saying designing sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into research is one crucial component contributing to world-class science and technology. We hope to support social equity and environmental sustainability by helping scientists and engineers create medicines, health regimes, technologies that work for us all. Now, I could go to our website and do a whole, a short policy piece, but I think we'll stop and take questions. And then if you want to learn more about policy, I would be happy to say something about that. The policy is important because it looks at the infrastructure of science, where you need policy in the funding agencies to support sex, gender, and intersectional analysis in proposals, or you don't give people public funding. Then you need policy in peer-reviewed journals. So at the end, if journals don't integrate sex and gender and intersectional analysis properly, the article is not excellent and you don't publish it. But where we're really failing is the third pillar of this infrastructure, which is universities. That's us, right? We are not necessarily teaching natural scientists, environmental scientists, engineers, technologists, computer scientists, how to do sex and gender analysis in their core curriculum. And a number of universities are trying to work on this now. Stanford has something called embedded CS, where they're trying to embed social analysis into the core computer science courses so Stanford feeds the companies in Silicon Valley. So we're trying to get the students, to get the employees, future employees of Apple and Meta and all these companies to think about the social impact of their technology before they launch it. So we universities, we need to do more. Thank you.
Many thanks, Londa, for your class. It was very, very interesting. I'm sure that all the people in the audience were were listening very carefully for what you were saying. We have some time for questions. You can ask in English or you can ask in Spanish, and I can do my best to translate it if you prefer. Of course, I have a question.
I see two questions in the Q&A, but they're in Spanish. Oh, something about the PowerPoint.
Yeah, they are asking if we are gonna.
Oh, share it?
If we're gonna share.
I could certainly share the PowerPoint. Most of the information is on the Gendered Innovations website, and you can also then see more, like on the marine science, you can see more on the internet, but I would be happy to share it. And then what's this second one here? Able to access the present. Oh, same thing. Share the PowerPoint. I did read it.
Yeah, you're good at this. I'm getting better.
And thank you, Francesca.
I can start with a question, if you agree.
Of course.
I was thinking about how you presented so many different examples and case studies in so many different areas and using so many different methods. So my question is, what are your suggestions about how to build this interdisciplinary work or group? I mean, what knowledge do you think we should bring to build this kind of knowledge? And in a way, how to build a dream team for gender and sex analysis in innovation?
Yeah, well, I love collaborations, and I find that they're hard to deal with. It's hard to get a dream team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to find the people who work well and deliver on time, and then I stick with them. Okay, so what we did to build gendered innovations, the whole website is peer-reviewed, and it was built on the model of workshops where we would bring, say, 15 experts in different areas to do 3 of our case studies. So we would early on, let's say we did heart disease. We tried to do one on, differences in the brain, which we completely never did because that failed. The experts on day 2 of the workshop would not make eye contact. So it doesn't always work. But what we did is to bring, all right, we did this thing on machine learning where we discovered the computer vision problem.
Mm-hmm.
We brought 18 computer scientists, gender experts, a few sociologists together, and we discussed for a couple of days, and we were talking about fairness and all the issues wherein we tried to do a model of machine learning. This was in 2018, so a long time ago for machine learning. We tried to do a model of where you would make checks in each step of the process, but that was too reductive in a way. So I think what you need to do, I really like this workshop model where you get together experts, you have a goal, but not too well defined, but you need experts who can talk to each other. You need the gender experts who do not stay in their little realm of special language and rhetoric. You need gender experts who can talk across disciplines and listen and offer advice. And then you need scientists and engineers who can be patient and speak in simple language. Of course, they're going to speak to their immediate colleagues in their technical language, but there's a large part in interdisciplinary work, there's a large part of listening across disciplines, and it's hard work. So when we did these workshops, they were typically a day and a half. And I would say some of the time on the first day was spent to understanding what everybody was talking about, right? Across disciplines. So now I have a lot of collaborators and I work with them a lot. So the machine learning, I started working with this new professor who had come to Stanford. Somebody tipped me off that he was already interested in social, and he was interested in gender and race, in machine learning and biostatistics and all this stuff. And I immediately called him to my office. We did the 2018 workshop and we still work together. Right now, we're working together with a global group of authors, 12 authors globally, preparing guidance for nature on quantitative intersectional approaches. And we hope that will be published soon. We've been working on that forever, and we hope it's going to be.
Sounds very useful.
Yeah, it really is. And that was difficult because that has to be at a high technical level, but you need to be able to talk across all the disciplines that nature represents, which is millions. Yeah, so it's hard work, but it's very rewarding when you get it. So I think you should really work on that.
We have another question from Xiomara Gertsen. She says, what are the main challenges to incorporate gender perspective in STEM, the grant system, scientists?
Well, okay, the main challenges are that scientists are not trained in their core discipline to think about this stuff. That's where we really need work. And this would be the university providing resources to integrate this sort of thing. So as I said, we're going to review all of this soon. Stanford is, so there's something called embedded ethics. It's embedded ethics in CS. And this could be generalized to engineering, to biotech, to any of the STEM fields. I know one of my colleagues does it in linguistics, so that you are presenting both the technical, how do you code this? And at the same time, if you code it this way, you might get this social impact. If you code it this way, you might get this social impact. What social impact do you want? What is dangerous and what is useful in terms of gender or race or socioeconomic status or disabilities, right? So this has to be brought into the educational system. And of course, that's slow. And it won't be until the next generation. So the current generation needs to educate themselves like you're doing, this kind of project. And I would really recommend that your national granting agency require at least sex and gender, if not intersectionality, that might be too hard, at least sex and gender analysis in projects where it's important, or don't give people public funding, right? If you're using taxpayer money, the research, the scientific research, the technological developments should be benefiting everyone. So there are many models for this. You can go learn from other people who've done it, right? In Japan, I'm going to Japan for 2 weeks next month. They have an institute for gendered innovations, and so does South Korea. So the government has funded an institute that focuses on these things, brings people together. So it seems to me that the funding agencies are going to have to offer some support for this kind of transition. So it depends if they're valuing it, also. So and then if you want to publish in Nature or The Lancet or some of these big journals, you better include sex and gender analysis. They all have adopted the SAGER guidelines, sex and gender equity in research, the SAGER guidelines. You can find them easily. Those are good guidelines for how you integrate those things into a research project, because they're saying what the reviewers should be looking for at the other end. So do you know the SAGER guidelines?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I do. I don't know if the rest know. But
I think that's a good thing. And you can use our website. We have all these methodologies detailed out kind of through the research process. So you can look at that, get some good ideas. I hope that we cite a lot of the literature, and I know it's work, but you gotta make, we have to be responsible. We have to make science and engineering that's responsible for human beings and for the planet.
But we have many more questions.
Okay, good.
So Maria Cristina is asking, since analyzing gender enhances all phases of research, how can we detect or monitor gender or intersectional research and publications?
How can we detect or monitor gender? I don't quite get the question.
Cristina, Maria Cristina, you can.
You mean in a literature search, or I don't know what detect or monitor gender.
I can open her microphone so she can explain.
Oh yes, that would be very nice.
Hey, thank you very much. Nice talking to you, Londa. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering how we can monitor gender-focused or intersectional research, because it's not only an issue of I don't know, interviewing 10 men and 10 women or mentioning the term gender. So how can we detect or find or make a literature review on gender in that sense? How can we categorize a research that has a gender focus and does not only mention the women, no?
Yeah, right. Doesn't only mention women. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. So again, I think if you have to really study these things here. So I would say this is the answer to your question. Let me get that bigger here. Does this get bigger? So you would want, now it's hard to see the whole thing. So you want to, okay, so it says, so here are the tips for identifying the problem. So of course, it may play a role in studies that involve humans. So first of all, gender is only about humans, not even marine organisms, right? Just humans. Perform your literature search with adequate terms for gender and sex. You'll find that many research articles mix up gender and sex. They often use gender when they mean sex. So you've got to be careful because they think sex is a rude word. And so they'll use gender just to use a nicer word, but they're really talking about sex. So you got to be careful for that. And then consider the project's relevance in relation to different gender identities, norms, and relations. So you have your tips here, and then we have the tips for the designing of the research. Sure, you use appropriate sample size for gender comparison, but you have to inspect your analytical concepts, categories, and theoretical models for misguided or stereotypical assumptions. You just have to know a lot about gender. This is why I think if you can find a gender scholar, either a social sociologist or a historian or philosopher, and bring them in, they will know a lot about gender and can help guide your literature search, as you're trying to do that. So this really is the answer to your question. And yes, it's complicated, but this is how you do it. And then we have the same thing for intersectional analysis. Let's see, I get out of here. So we have the same kind of thing for and soon we'll have another big example. So we go through the steps for intersectional analysis, designing research. It's not simple, and it's something that needs to be taught at university. It's a pity that, engineers and technologists are so taught such great detail in their subject matter, but, gender is just something completely left out. And then, Apple or Google launches something and suddenly it's all wrong. Now they've wasted a lot of money. They have to take it back. They have to fix it. They're embarrassed. People are upset. We don't need to do that. We can teach this at university.
We have another question related to that. It says how to start teaching these things in engineering and in other, how to start teaching this.
Yeah, how to start teaching this. So this is what I hope. As I said, there's a group of us that in about a year, we will have evaluated across the US these courses that embed social analysis in computer science. And then you could imagine how you would do that in engineering. And those would then be model courses that you could use or model your course off of. You could see the components. What we want to do is break it down into components of what you would need to do this. So I'm sorry we don't have that yet, but that's the sort of thing. So I will tell you, so Stanford has some, I haven't looked at them yet, but Stanford has some of these embedded CS courses on their website. Harvard is the one who, Barbara Gross at Harvard is the one that invented embedded ethics. She was working with one of her colleagues from philosophy. And so she has she has a video, a short video on it and a short article, but it's just kind of championing the idea. It's not really telling you how to do it, but there might be syllabi there that you could look at. So I would look on their website too. Yeah. And then the National Academy of Science in the US published a marvelous booklet, report on responsible computing. They wrote stuff that I, as a historian of science, would write. And they're, the computing people. And I thought, wow, this is really great. So I could share that link somewhere. We have the link on our website, but I could share that with you. Well, maybe I can find it here quickly so that you can go directly to it. Is it this one? Yeah, okay. So I think it's here. We have computer science curriculum. We started this topic, and I think we have that National Academy of Sciences. Here it is. This is a super report here from 2022, Fostering Responsible Computing Research, Foundations and Practices. That's online. You can get it. That might be helpful to you as well. Let me leave that up for a minute, but I'm happy to take another question.
Yeah, we have.
That's here. So that's on our website. That's here. Science and computer science curriculum. So you can find what we have to say about that. We have, a lot to say about that. I'm not sure it's the best yet, but anyway. Okay.
We have another question from Florencia Casobon. It says, personally, after getting into this major, I feel a responsibility to be a good example and take into consideration gender and sex. However, most of my male peers don't.
Yeah.
How do you deal with this sense of responsibility? It is sometimes exhausting.
Welcome to my world. Well, it's good if you are feeling that responsibility. I find that there are a lot of male colleagues in computer science that are on this. They call it fairness, not gender analysis, but they call it transparency and fairness. I think it's FAT, fairness, accountability, and transparency. There's a whole organization of that. And so a lot of people are on this. And, I think if we didn't use the term gender, somehow gender means women. It does not. Everybody has gender, excuse me, but if we use other terms like responsible computing, maybe the men would be more on board. So I wouldn't push the term gender. I never use the term feminist. Of course, I'm a feminist, but I find it's a turnoff. So I use the words that get me the most, get me the most results.
I agree, totally. Sometimes it's difficult because they don't understand and they also feel threatened.
But you will find that this infrastructure is coming where journals will be asking for gender. I mean, some of these guys might get a paper rejected because, well, you ignored the gender aspect. I mean, that would be the best, of course, to show them that this is expected now. But I do find that reviewers often don't do their job, or don't know how to do their job. So after 30 years, we're still in the starting days, but we have done so much in 30 years. I have to say, there's been so much positive change. And I can testify to that. I've been in academia a long time. When I went to graduate school at Harvard, there were no women professors in the discipline of history. And now at Stanford, we're at least 42%. So big changes, right? And many of our faculty, many of the men as well do gender stuff. We have this guy, Matt Summers, who does marvelous gender studies in China. So, you know, it's coming. Please help it move along, but don't get discouraged because globally, there's a huge movement to do this. So you could maybe, Chile could connect up with Argentina, and don't you have the Southern Cone? Maybe you could gender in the Southern Cone.
Yeah, we will do that. Okay, so a lot of other messages saying thank you to you, and I also want to thank you again for this class. The entire diversity department is very happy with this talk, and nothing. I hope all the people in the audience enjoyed it, and hope to see you again soon, and maybe do something.
Yeah, go to the website. There's tons of stuff on the website. It's well worth it. We try to write it as short as we can while still getting the point across. So yes, it's
Super.
great to be.
We always use it. I
Okay.
mean,
Oh, good.
we talk about that with students, and yeah, so it's our favorite website ever.
Good. Okay.
And many
Thank
many
you.
thanks, and see you soon.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.